Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I just wrapped out an amazing workout. I hope you guys are having a great day. I am your host, Ben Bukulski. This is the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Today I want to dive into a bunch of really cool stuff that'll hopefully help you. So as I said, I just finished a workout. I'd like to walk you through why I choose exercise. Exercise selection is a big piece of understanding how to ultimately get the most of every workout. I think a lot of people go in to the gym maybe without a plan or maybe without an idea on how to choose exercises. So we're going to dive into that today. I also want to dive into this transformation that I mentioned to you, this thing that I'm going through for the next 12 weeks. I'd love to have you join me. I'll walk you through a few details every week. And really, I've just started. So what does it look like to start for me? And what do I think you should do to start? Those are kind of the primary focuses of today's podcast. A few other golden tidbits of information there, like what's in my supplement cabinet, how am I starting this transformation as far as cardio, as far as supplementation, how I'm making the most of everything I need to do. That ultimately goes into creating a transformation, but it's not just a transformation that is a one and done, right? The objective of this transformation for me is how do I get in the best shape of my life and then use that as a kickstart to maintain those habits for life. My target now is no longer getting in shape once and having a great picture to show and a $7 trophy and moving on with the day. I want to be able to sustain these things that I attain over time. I want to be able to sustain it forever. And my objective then is doing this in the most sustainable way possible. And that's what I want to empower you with, a completely different paradigm in exercise. So most people in fitness say, hey, let's get in shape once, let's do a contest. And then what happens after? Health falls out the window. People usually can't sleep well. They usually gain body fat. They're usually disconnected from their body incredibly because they've put themselves into a place of lacking health and ultimately not enjoying the process, right? So taking this approach of what does it look like to create a sustainable transformation? And I think that's possible. I think it's absolutely reasonable for you to like it, for you to enjoy it, and for you to ultimately create high impact habits that you can carry on with you for the rest of your life. So without further ado and introduction, I'm going to walk right into this stuff. So the way I frame this quote unquote transformation, I'm going to do 12 weeks, and I really want to do it in the most sustainable way possible, as I say. So what does that look like to begin with? I'll tell you the biggest mistake everyone makes in transformations, and I've talked about this at nauseum, is they don't consider their health. They just consider, I want to get in shape at all costs. And I get the value of that, but I don't think those two things need to be mutually exclusive. I think getting in the best shape of your life should also mean health, because ultimately health, in my definition of it, and again, this is something I just made up, but it's ultimately the ability to adapt to imposed demand, to adapt to imposed stress. So the more healthy you are, the faster your body can adapt to imposed demand, stress, any type of stress. So, when you're young, you can do anything, boom, you bounce back the next day, you feel great, right? You go out and you go drinking, boom, you're back the next day. You go have a hard workout, boom, you're back the next day. As you get older, it gets slower, doesn't it? Everything starts to slow down. And that's, in my eyes, just some indication of diminishing health. So if I'm subjected to stress or a workout or anything, the faster my body bounces back, to me, that's an indication of optimized health. So I'm trying to consider that as maybe the foundation of a transformation. Wouldn't that make sense? My target in transformation is I want to be able to push my work capacity up as high as I can possibly take it, or at least as high as I can possibly sustain it, while still being able to recover from it. So recovery needs to be this massive piece. So recovery, again, we'll get into that today, but needs to encompass the conversation around this 360-degree approach to health, right? So all these things that go into health, which ultimately is the 6 pillars of a lean, healthy, and muscular body, and I'll go through that again today. So hopefully you guys can start to understand a big part of this conversation, whether it be for men or women, is optimizing your health as the foundation of everything you do going forward. So if you're someone who wants to build muscle, well, doesn't it make sense that the faster we recover, the more muscle we build? Doesn't it make sense that maybe the less we have to recover because our body's really good at adapting to things, right? I think that's important. And what you'll notice is if you're not healthy, let's say you get sick, someone who's really healthy, what happens? Bounce back, right? Someone who's not so healthy takes longer. So first thing we're going to focus on in this transformation that I'm going to focus on, hopefully you'll join me with this journey, is I want to look at health. What does that ultimately look like? And obviously it's very subjective, person to person, but here's a few things that I want you to consider. Aerobic fitness is massive, massive, massive. So we just add in a daily morning walk. And the thing with a daily morning walk that I've been advocating for years now is consistency. So it doesn't have to be record breaking. It doesn't have to be incredibly challenging, although we can make it challenging. but it needs to be consistent. And I need you to focus on getting better at it, not just doing it. It's not mindless. Like anything we do in the gym, it should be mindful. So we want to think about how does it feel to walk? How does it feel to walk correctly? And I'll get into that if you like. But ultimately, we want to be present in the way we walk and not do anything mindlessly. So if I go into the gym, I don't want to be mindless when I train. I want to be absolutely mindful, because the way I do anything is the way I do everything. So when it comes to walking, all that looks like is maybe you wear some type of minimalist shoe, and maybe you are forced to pay attention to the way your foot strikes the ground because you don't have a 3-inch pad under your heel. Gosh, it kind of hurts if I don't have this big pad. So now I have to be a little bit more aware when I walk. Maybe I'm a little bit softer in the way that I land. Maybe I roll through my foot rather than slapping my foot into the ground. That's just a very foundational way to start. Start walking a little more mindfully. Start paying attention to the way your spine feels, the way your breath feels, the way your arm swings are existing. So again, are they really small and minimized arm swings? Are you able to make them a little bit more pronounced and incorporate a little bit of rotation in the spine? Start getting your body moving a little more freely so that ultimately it is a little more mobile, a little more stable in all of these positions. And this should ultimately be the progression of this foundational morning walk that everyone should be doing. And my favorite time to do it is right around the time the sun goes up. So I get to watch the sunrise, at least on my way back. I try to time it so I'm going 30 minutes out, and on the way back, I'm walking into the sun. So I'm seeing it on the horizon. I'm seeing the beautiful colors in the sky, hopefully in many places. And that's a big, big piece of this recovery puzzle. So aerobic fitness, on top of increasing blood flow, nutrient utilization, so many massive benefits that exist in walking, on top of this reality that I've spoken about in the past, that walking is the second most foundational thing we do, functional thing we do ultimately, right? People talk about functional movement. Well, walking is certainly the second most functional thing we do, just behind breathing. And if you don't walk well, if you can't walk well, how would you expect ever to squat or lunge or deadlift well, right? Or even do any type of movement well? Walking and breathing are the most functional things we do. And you need to do those anatomically, biomechanically, efficiently, or effectively if you expect to stack movements on top of that. So a big focus for me in the first few weeks is getting back into this intentional walking and breath practice. And those can be together or those can be separate. And I tend to do both. I tend to walk and do a deep focused breath practice where I'm intentionally extending out my breath, or I'm intentionally trying to get to 6 to 10 second inhalations, a slight pause, and 6 to 10 second exhalations while I'm walking intensely. So as far as the walk effort, I want it to be slightly more intense than you're comfortable with. So it's never just like, oh, I'm going to kind of saunter down it's not a Sunday stroll. It's not a stroll at the mall. I'm walking slightly faster than I'm comfortable with. Maybe sometimes I'm thinking about, like, if I'm walking across the road and there's a car coming, that kind of pace, right? Or if someone's chasing me, which is maybe not the best visual, but you guys get it. Someone's trying to get me, I'm walking faster. I have somewhere to be, that type of walk. And as far as the breath practice, we want to make sure it's diaphragmatic. You guys have heard this 1,000 times, and I just want to make sure that I touch it for anyone who hasn't heard this stuff before. Diaphragmatic, always through the nose. And that's kind of your governor, right? If you can't keep the breath through your nose, you're going too fast for you, and progress your way up in intensity until you can maintain high levels of intensity exclusively on nasal breathing. Once you get better at nasal breathing, what you'll find is your diaphragm tends to work a little bit better, moves down into your belly a little bit more effectively, and you can actually breathe significantly less per minute. And there's so many reasons why that's beneficial to start your day that way. Ultimately benefits of the autonomic nervous system, heart rate variability, improving recovery, improving aerobic fitness, which is ultimately the foundation for recovery in the entire body. So that's a big piece of the way I start this. So that's my aerobic piece. Now let's look at the diet piece. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in dieting is cutting their calories. I really do. And that sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? I think the biggest mistake people make in the first 4 weeks of dieting is cutting calories. I think the first 4 weeks of dieting should be focused on where the food is coming from, and being consistent with meal timing, maybe being a little more consistent with whole foods, less hyperpalatable foods. So we're really establishing a nice, clear, clean palate so that we're not seeking things that ultimately aren't great for us. So that's my first 3 to 4 weeks. We'll see how it goes. But I'm just removing things that are hyperpalatable. So some things that I would have had in the past, maybe I would be adding something like a sweetener to my coffee, a stevia, or I would be having flavored rice cakes, or I would be having peanut butter, almond butter, things like that. I'm just going to remove them. And I haven't had peanut butter in a very long time. I'll be honest and share that. But things that I know are hyper palatable, and that could be things that are super crunchy, super salty, super sweet. Even if it's artificial flavors with no calories, I still think it's a very good idea to remove them. I know it's not always pleasant, but I promise your body will learn to appreciate the glory of a sweet potato and the amazing flavor of rice or rice cakes, or even salt on your meat is wonderful. And you'll learn to appreciate the beauty of real foods, and whether that be vegetables or fruits. So for the first few weeks, we're just going to choose whole foods. And as far as the amounts, my typical restriction, and the one I put on myself, is you just eat protein, enough protein, make sure your protein intake is there. So for me, it's about 300 grams of protein a day. So I like to split that over 4 meals. So it puts me in around 75 grams of protein every meal. That's a lot of protein. But I make sure too that my body is not just eating it, but it's also absorbing it, because I throw in my enzymes, my digestive enzymes. You guys know I'm an advocate of Masszymes from Bioptimizers, awesome product. So make sure my body is not just consuming it, but also utilizing, absorbing, and assimilating these nutrients I'm putting in. So that's criteria number 1. Criteria number 2, vegetables at every meal. It doesn't have to be a huge amount, but something. And I typically stay away from things that are high in oxalates. So I'll stay away from spinach. I'll stay away from Swiss chard. Usually stay away from almonds most of the time. Sweet potatoes I've minimized, and I tend to feel better. There's a lot less joint pain. If you haven't heard my podcast with Sally Norton, I highly suggest you check it out on oxalates. She's brilliant. The oxalates don't bug everyone, but if you tend to get a little achy, a little joint pain, oxalates may be a thing for you. So look at it. So the next thing I'm going to consider when I'm choosing my food dietarily is minimizing inflammation. I always see nutrition through the lens of an inflammation. So what am I consuming that's inflammatory to my body? Now, here's the crazy thing. Something that's inflammatory to me may not be inflammatory to you, based on gut health, based on history, based on genetics. So I know I don't do well with dairy and gluten. I'm not dogmatic about saying that everyone should remove dairy and gluten. Some people, and I'll be honest, I think it's a very small percentage, can tolerate dairy and gluten. I still don't think it's a great idea. I still don't think it's an optimal food choice. It's not helping you in any way, right? So if you're someone who really wants to get in shape and do this for life, considering removing dairy and gluten from your diet is a very good thing to do, I think, in general. Just as far as minimizing inflammatory markers, I think that's massive. Now, there's other foods that are inflammatory to me that may not be inflammatory to you. An example being chicken. I feel terrible when I eat chicken. And I think the reason, my belief is, the reason is maybe it's I've consumed a lot as a bodybuilder over my 20 years as aspiring to be the largest human on the planet. I ate a lot of chicken. Or I also believe that what the chicken eats matters. So if I'm eating chicken that's consuming soy and corn, things that are maybe unnatural to it, it just doesn't feel good to me. I can eat about 6 ounces of chicken and I feel like I ate a pumpkin. Whereas I can eat 16 ounces of beef and feel like I'm ready to run a marathon. And that's an indication to me that maybe I shouldn't consume chicken all that often. Maybe about once a month I consume chicken. Again, just because maybe it's convenient at that time. So choosing foods that are low inflammation for you. So just going through the typical list of the common culprits. Grains are very inflammatory for some people. Dairy, soy, corn, vegetable oils. Those are all things we want to remove. So that's important. Now, the other side of that is eating things that are anti-inflammatory and trying to bring down inflammatory markers in your body so your body can be more effective at digesting food, at utilizing the food that you eat. So some things that I add in very consistently, as you guys know, olive oil is a massive one. Oleic acid in olive oil is incredibly beneficial for decreasing inflammation. I also consume curcumin, which I sometimes take in supplement form. I also take it in mustard form. I was going to jokingly make my name here on the screen today. I like mustard because any bodybuilder that you meet, most will always have, or at least people who diet hard, will have developed a relationship with mustard, whether good or bad, because it's calorie free and usually very healthy. So I get one from Whole Foods that is got apple cider vinegar rather than white vinegar. And again, I don't think it's that much of a difference, but I like it. I think it's great. And I use it for anti-inflammatory reasons and because it tastes good. Another thing I'm going to add in for anti-inflammatory reasons is going to be fish. I eat quite a bit of fish when I'm prepping for a contest, not because there's anything miraculous about things in my skin, but because it decreases inflammation. right? So if I'm eating some wild-caught Alaskan salmon or some wild-caught cod, or occasionally have canned salmon from Wild Planet, maybe it's called, and 2 cans of that, and I'm ready to go. And I think getting omega-3s in at a high level is important. And if you're not eating a lot of fish, or if you don't have access to high-quality fish, you can also always check out wildalaskanseafoodbox.com. I think my code probably still works. They're no longer sponsoring the podcast, but they are, I think the code still works. I think the code was just Ben, wildalaskanseafoodbox.com/Ben. I still get my seafood from them. Fantastic company. So check it out. You can also get them at Billings Seafood. So great products. So I'll consume fish 1 to 2 times a day, I would say. So I'm eating 4 meals a day now. So you guys know I went from 1 meal for quite a long time to 2, and now I'm at 4. So meal 1 of the day is always typically beef, and I get all my beef from Belcampo because I think it's just the best quality. I mean, I talked to Anya, who's the owner, and it's just knowing the detail they go into to feed their animals and rotate their crops. And I just appreciate that so much. And it's slightly more expensive, there's no doubt, but it's extremely, extremely high quality. You can literally taste the difference. It tastes like meat that is just nourishing rather than like acidifying, if that makes any sense. And again, I don't know if we have a code there, maybe BPAC 10 actually. Again, this isn't meant to be like throwing a bunch of codes at you, but if you're interested, great company. And again, no affiliation. They just, they're awesome. So they don't pay for this. I just throw the code out because I like it. What else am I doing dietarily? So supplements, I guess that's important. I've got like 10 supplements that I consume on a consistent basis, and I think you should too, as far as being the foundations of human health. Now, everyone goes, I have to take these 10 supplements every day forever. No, I don't think you should take anything every day forever, but these are the ones that kind of never leave my house. I always have a bottle of these things in my house. There's a few others that I'll put on, but so vitamin B is important, particularly for me. I have a riboflavin genetic deficiency, so I have to make sure I get enough riboflavin. Vitamin C, I think, is always useful, and you can add N-acetylcysteine in there as well. And I think that's not on my list, but I think N-acetylcysteine is amazing for immune support. So I think if you're someone who's compromised or curious about maintaining optimization of immunity, N-acetylcysteine has amazing research behind it. In fact, that exceeds the benefit of the flu vaccine. I've seen quite a bit of research on it. It's interesting. Vitamin D, you guys know, is always in the house, and I take about 10,000 IUs a day. Transparently, I don't remember every day, but I take at least 4 or 5 days a week. Magnesium, I'm a massive magnesium consumer, and I think literally every human should be, especially if you're either stressed or exercising. Magnesium tends to get burned through muscle contraction. So taking a magnesium, and I take a multi-source magnesium, so I got about 7 or 8 different sources. So I'll typically get my magnesium from Bioptimizers again. They've got one called Mag Breakthrough, which is awesome. I said fish oil. Collagen's a huge one. If you eat a lot of muscle meat, collagen's a big one. So taking collagen protein or glycine, at very least the amino acid glycine or proline, are extremely important for optimizing health. A couple more things. We do electrolytes every day because bringing down inflammation, helping your body make sure you have enough minerals, essential aminos, and choline. Choline is imperative for your brain. And obviously, you guys know I kind of look at life through the lens of optimizing my brain. So if that means there's things I can take to support brain health, support my brain's ability to work at a higher level for a longer period of time, I'm going to take it. And choline is imperative on that list. And so is B vitamins, actually. There's a bunch of other herbs you can stack on there that are very, very useful. And again, I mentioned enzymes earlier being one thing that I take every day because I do consume large amounts of protein, and most people do. And like, if you're someone looking to optimize their body, you probably should be consuming a lot of protein, and making sure your body's absorbing, breaking down, and assimilating that protein is important. And again, that's masszymes. So I said with respect to this transformation, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of info about how I'm training right now and how maybe you should train right now. So the big thing in transformation, well, the big thing everyone should be focusing on before anything else matters, before programming matters, before intensity even matters, specificity of movement. If your mobility stinks, I can tell you with 1,000% certainty you don't build muscle very well, or at least not as well as you could be. And people think, I'm a big meathead and I don't need to do mobility training. I think it's the biggest mistake that people make. And I was honestly blessed. I'll be completely transparent. My mobility when I was a child was spectacular, which I now see in my children. To be honest, like I didn't do a lot of mobility stuff early in my career, but I was still incredibly mobile. So the splits for me were always very easy. For most of my life, I could put my leg behind my head. Like my hip mobility was tremendous. So what does that say about my ability to build my legs? Well, guess what? That was a big, big piece. The fact that my hips were super mobile most of the time. And when they weren't mobile, guess what happened? I started to lose my ability to contract. My muscle building capacity went down. So if you're not someone who's already training mobility, I would suggest you do it. Here's the 3-part framing of exercise that everyone should consider adopting. There should be this trilogy or this balance among this trilogy of types of training. So there should be one day, or at least some integration of mobility and stability, always. There should be some integration of aerobic and anaerobic training, always. And there should be some integration of muscle building and strength training. And that's the 3-part trilogy. And the dynamic balance of how you approach those is different person to person, right? So if I want to build a ton of muscle, well, I probably do more hypertrophy training than I do mobility work, or more hypertrophy training than I do metabolic training. But if I lose some fat, maybe I do more of the metabolic stuff and more of the stability stuff. So this is always just kind of undulating dynamic process of what does it look like to balance these 3 stimuli. So for me personally right now, actually not right now because it's been kind of slow as far as my ability to yoga lately, but normally it's yoga and cardio one day, and that cardio could be walking or riding my bike or something, usually not inside. And the next day is training, and I just alternate back and forth like that. And then transparently, I haven't done yoga in a long time because the places are all closed or at half capacity, and it's not all that fun to wear a mask while you're walking into the yoga place. I digress. So those are important. So getting a little bit deeper into this transformation thing. Here's one thing that I think you should all lean in on. When it comes to your diet, if you want to transform, now this may sound counterintuitive to what I've typically told you. I suggest highly that you become neurotic about what you eat. And now that doesn't mean, I want to get mad at me for that, but that doesn't mean you have to obsess and you have to stress. But I think you should have 100% commitment or nothing. So as soon as you start to allow 1% divergence, you're going to fail. You're setting yourself up for failure. As soon as you start letting the rationalizations creep in, like, it's not really a big deal if I just do this once. It's not really a big deal if I have this one glass of alcohol or this one chocolate bar or protein bar, whatever the hell that's not supposed to be in your diet. Don't do that. Commit to 12 weeks of excellence, and it'll be worth it in the end. And again, it'll be so much easier if you commit to 100%. I promise. I know that sounds counterintuitive. Commit to 100% commitment to your plan, whatever that plan looks like. So my suggestion is remove those hyperpalatable foods, remove alcohol, remove things that are pro-inflammatory. 12 weeks. We can do this. We'll do it together. I said I was going to talk about exercise selection. So the first, and I briefly touched on this, but the first and most important piece of exercise selection is, can you get into the range of motion? If you can't get into the range of motion, you certainly can't train the muscle correctly. That would make logical sense, right? So a muscle has its full contractile range. If you can't take a muscle through its full contractile range because they're quote unquote tight, well, then you can't train a muscle and you're never going to build it. So this is how people start getting even worse discrepancies from strong and weak body parts, because they just train in the range that they have, and they're getting, I'm really strong in this one range. We have people who can bench press 500 pounds but can't put on their seatbelt or can't scratch their nose kind of thing, or can't comb their hair. It's a big issue. So that's where injuries happen. That's where tears happen. So my suggestion is mobility becomes a huge part of your training. So when we're selecting exercises, the first question to ask is, what am I capable of doing through a full range with great form? That needs to be a big piece. I think most people do exercises, one, incorrectly, two, way too many. How many exercises? One of the number of questions I get all the time is, Ben, how many exercises for, insert body part, chest? Answer, the ones you do well, right? And the one or two that you do well in most instances, and most people try to do 6 and they all suck, and there's no benefit to those, right? So the objective is, we do 1 or 2 that you do really well, maybe 3 at most, and do them really, really, really well. Do more sets, and then slowly, synergistically build the skill set of the other ones. So then, okay, how do I choose exercises that I do well? How do I know? Well, what do you feel? If you feel it well, that's sometimes a good indication. Not always, but sometimes. Then watch some of the videos we put out and say, like, hey, Am I doing this correctly for my body? This is a big piece that I want to pass on to you guys. This training doesn't just exist for me. You should certainly not train the way I train. You should train the way your body needs to train. The principles are the same. The way that we train, ultimately we call it training with intelligence, is principally accurate, irrefutably accurate, right? But then you have these biomechanical realities that everyone's built differently. Someone who's 160 pounds is very different than someone who's 260 pounds, both from a purely mass perspective, but also often from a structural perspective. Lever lengths are different, limb lengths, clavicle lengths, hip structure, it's all different. So you got to learn to choose exercise that work for you. And this is a big part of my mission, is passing these things on to you guys so you understand, like, hey, I'm not doing this correctly for my body. Just because I watch some meathead on YouTube do this and he's got a huge chest or huge legs, it's not mean it's going to work for me. And so spend some time learning to direct tension. I call it quality of movement or precision of movement, because your energy expenditure is going to be exponentially better, more effective, and the muscle will be taxed more. So let's think of it like signal to noise ratio, right? If I just do a bunch of stuff, I cause all this systemic inflammation, but maybe I don't burn as many calories locally. Maybe I don't have the same amount of signal at the level of the muscle. And I'm ultimately just creating a whole bunch of noise, this inflammatory, stressful noise that may not be giving me the actual signal that I want. And my body's got to manage all that stress and all that inflammation before it can ever get to ultimately recovering and rebuilding this muscle. So think about that, guys. It's important. So that should be the foundation of everything. Now, as far as how to choose exercises, you have to look. You have to watch what your body's doing. And this is challenging because most of us now go to the gym and wear hoodies, long pants, and you can't see anything. It's very, very challenging. But first, line up the force. So if I have a resistance, that's this vertical resistance, like a dumbbell or a barbell, I need to make sure that the muscle I'm trying to train is actually lined up appropriately relative to that resistance. That's foundationally imperative. So if you're trying to train a particular part of the pec or a particular part of the lat, you have to make sure the muscle you're training is actually the thing doing work. And I would say 90% of the time it's not. People just don't understand. And it's not complex in any way. I know I don't explain all that well on the podcast, but it's incredibly easy to see if you just open your eyes and look. And this is why we have classes around the world teaching people these intelligent training principles. And people come to these classes, and we just did one a couple weeks ago, and they're like, man, this is the best experience of my life. It's literally changed my life. And I'm like, well, yeah, because it's easy, right? It's simple. They're like, man, why didn't anybody else teach me this stuff when I was a child or, in the last 20 years? Because nobody gets it. And this is what I hope to impart with you is this understanding that really it's not complex. It's just not common that people understand this stuff. People just don't think about it. Or maybe you could argue people just don't think. They just mindlessly go about life. And I think that's a huge obstacle for us in people trying to ultimately thrive, be successful, be happy, be mindful, right? This mindful piece is such a big imperative aspect of thriving, isn't it? So I want to learn to be mindful first, then I can learn to be grateful and ultimately present in love. Those are the things that are imperative to our progress as human beings and to our thriving as human beings. Hopefully every one of you guys listening to this podcast is aspiring to that. Like, you want to be happy, right? You don't just want to be rich. You don't just want to be muscular. You want to be happy. I would guess most people would say yes. And they created this association and say, hey, when I become muscular, I'll be happy. Or when I become rich, I'll be happy. Not true. Completely bullshit. Take it from me. Doesn't make sense. You have to be happy now. You have to train your brain. Again, it is training. It's like climbing a mountain. You're not going to get there overnight. You're going to have to train your brain to first be present so you can make conscious decisions. It's a big thing in transforming your body and your mind and your life. You got to be present. Am I mindful of the things I'm doing? Am I conscious of the things I'm doing? Or am I just kind of going about my day mindlessly meandering about, right? Like the 99% of zombies that exist in this world. That's not a shot at people, but ultimately this is reality. We don't think, right? And that is a big part of the mission of my business, is to create a mindful approach to muscle building. Training with intelligence is about being mindful of the things you do. So what does that feel like in the gym? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is, instead of just mindlessly moving weight, I'm going to pick up a weight and I'm going to go, where do I feel this? How does it feel in my body? Do I feel strong? Do I feel weak? Where do I feel strong? Where do I feel weak? Which is very different, right? Our body can feel strong in certain places and weak in other places. And maybe I'm going to close my eyes and pay attention to that feeling a lot more. Okay, well, if I start moving this weight, what happens? What do I feel? Am I feeling the muscle I'm actually trying to train? If not, there's a problem. We're doing it wrong, right? So the ability to not move your body. So this idea of creating systemic stability, full body stability, is massive. You have to be able to not move your body in order to move the rest of it, right? So, or move the isolated piece. So if I'm trying to train my bicep, I need to make sure that my entire body isn't moving because it's taking away from the opportunity that I'm trying to exploit, ultimately challenging my bicep. So I just got to pay attention. So instead of mindlessly doing things you've always done, guys, if you want to create a new physique, if you want to create a new life, you got to pay attention. You got to be mindful. And I think exercise is this amazing opportunity that everyone certainly listening to this podcast is able to capitalize on. So the next time you go in the gym, I want you to take a breath. I want you to do whatever exercise you're doing and go so slow that you can tell me at every inch of every rep what's moving, what's contracting, what's being challenged, where the tension is, where the stretch is, where the contraction is, all of those variables or any of those variables, right? Learn to feel and connect with your body. If you do that, this is what's going to happen. You're going to start to feel what's moving that shouldn't be. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm doing a bicep curl and all of a sudden my shoulder comes up. I'm doing a tricep push down. All of a sudden my shoulder comes up. I'm doing a squat and all of a sudden my lower back rounds, or I bounce into the bottom of a rep. You're going to start paying attention to the little minutia of things that shouldn't be moving that is, or my hips are going to start to move, or I'm going to do something that just doesn't, or my spine is going to flex and extend. Those are things that are not directly contributing in a positive way to your end result, right? This is the perfect metaphor for life. Is the time you pick up I'm doing something else and I start scrolling through social media. It's just a distraction. That's exactly what those little intricate things are in exercise. They're just distractions, taking away from your ultimate end result, taking away from your productivity. So guess what? Stop. It doesn't help. It's not useful to lift more weight. I promise you, lifting more weight is not the solution. Lifting as much weight as you possibly can with perfect form is always the answer. So when we look at exercise selection, we go, okay, what can my body first do? Then where does this exercise break? Meaning, why does it stop? And then how can I add in a synergistic exercise to train the thing that stopped? So an example being, if I'm doing a squat and my lower back starts to hurt, or if I'm doing a squat and my aerobic fitness starts to give out, I start to get tired, or maybe my lactic acid starts to burn, or if I'm doing a leg curl, my butt starts coming up. All those things are examples of movement that's happening that shouldn't be there. It should not happen. If we're trying to do an exercise, we're trying to train a small number of muscles, and those extraneous movements are not contributing in a positive way. So I have to look at then isolating that one part of the puzzle and going, how do I make this piece stronger in isolation so it no longer becomes a limiting factor in that exercise? It no longer becomes a thing that breaks. It's like this unraveling of the onion. So if I'm doing a lying leg curl, my hips come up, well, that's probably a pretty good indication that your abs are weak and your glutes are probably weak and not able to support that position. Maybe the pelvic floor, maybe the hamstrings. All those things could be contributing to that. So I need to train those things correctly in isolation, in the range of motion I'm able to control with an appropriate weight that I'm able to control with those muscles, right? It's not just me going and doing more of an exercise wrong, right? Doing more and more of something incorrect is not going to get you where you want to go. I promise. It's not going to get you where I want to go. You have to learn to do things correctly, right? If I want to go from here to point X down the road, running faster and faster, going in the wrong direction doesn't make a lot of sense. So I need to make sure that I'm first pointing in the right direction, two, using the right muscles in the right sequence, and then and only then does it make sense. So exercise selection, again, encompasses that. I think that's the missing piece. So what can I do? And then where does this exercise break? And then if you can learn to look at where an exercise breaks, and again, that's maybe needs more a clarification, explanation, but if something's moving that shouldn't be, ultimately that's breaking, right? So I look at it and say, well, okay, what can I do then to make that stronger? Most of you, I guarantee it's going to be something that happens at your trunk and spine, your shoulder girdle and scapula, or your pelvis. That's usually where, or sometimes it's the ankle. And these are what we call the four hubs of stability, right? So the foot and ankle, the hip and pelvis, the trunk and spine, and the shoulder girdle and scapula, right? So those are your hubs of stability. And if you can't stabilize those things, you can't build muscle. So that would be where I would suggest you guys start playing. And this is where the integration of stability and mobility comes in and is a big, big piece of this stuff. So hopefully, guys, that helps. I know I'm maybe rambling a little bit, but this is useful for you to start to understand. So one thing I want to talk about when it comes to this transformation, I think is important for you to succeed and not be stressed, because I think a lot of you guys stress. the first and most important thing when I decided to begin, like, hey, I'm going to get myself in better shape because I want to be in great shape. I want to do some photo shoots. I got some really interesting things happening that I'll share with you guys in the coming weeks. My intention is to do a podcast, short version, not quite this long, each week, and just telling you what I'm changing. So you guys can come along with the journey, come along on the journey with me. And if you like, come to the Olympia. Maybe at the Olympia, we're doing photos at the Olympia with some of the best photographers in the world. This is one of the most important pieces that I think each of you should explore before you do this. What are your values? So Dr. John Demartini's been a guest on the show in the past, and he gets into his value determinants. I think everyone should do that. So there's more or less, for the topic of conversation today, I'm going to tell you 4 of my top ones and why it's important to you. So my top values, in maybe no particular order, but family is huge. Integrity is huge. Growth, and that could be financial and intellectual. Health and fitness. Those are kind of my 4, muscle, and that incorporates in there. Those are kind of my 4 most important values. Now, those are, again, maybe those are in order, maybe. And that's a dynamic order. But when I'm making decisions on my transformation, I don't want to compromise those values. So I don't want to do things that puts my family at a lower order of importance. I don't want to do things that put my finances at a lower order of importance. I still have to look at those things and go, okay, well, how important are they to me? Which ones are at the top of the list? Because if I prioritize transformation and I don't take care of those other things that I value, guess what happens? Stress, right? Because values exist at an unconscious level. These are things that I value most in my life. And if I don't pay attention to them, I get stressed. And I don't want to be stressed. So I'm only going to commit to this transformation to the level that it doesn't add massive amounts of stress to my body or to my life. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it. That just means you have to realize that if you're going to miss a meal because you're at your child's sporting event, it's okay. You've made that conscious decision to say, my family is more important. If you're going to miss a workout because it's a matter of you're going to lose your job or you're going to make a bunch of money, you got to know where that falls on your list of priorities, of values. So that's how I approach it. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to sacrifice the end result. It just means that I'm going to sacrifice that moment and say, I'm going to consciously choose this value over this value because I know that's my highest value. So when I was competing in bodybuilding, there was no higher value, right? I was the highest value. My ego and being the best built bodybuilder in the world was the highest value. So nothing superseded that. And now that I'm retired, I've established this reality that health and fitness, to be honest, goes to number 4 at least, right? 4 it's dynamic. It might be up, might be down. But it's about number 4. So anytime my family, my integrity, and my growth, financial and intellectual, exist in my life, they exist higher than my fitness right now. Again, that's dynamic. That changes. That doesn't mean I don't value my fitness. That doesn't mean I don't train hard. That doesn't mean I don't do my cardio. That just means when it comes down to making that decision that day, that split-second decision where I go, I got to make money or I'm going to train, or I got to spend time with my kids or I'm going to train, right? 99 times out of 100, I'm going to choose the ones that are higher value. Again, it's a dynamic process. You can always adjust, but I think you guys should be aware of that. Like, what are the things, the values guiding your decision-making processes? It's important. So I want to know what you value and maybe make a list. And if you want some help, go to drdemartini.com and he's got his 13 value determinant questions. Absolutely worth doing. Guys, today's podcast is brought to you by masszymes.com. You can get amazing enzymes, Mag Breakthrough, which I use every day. We've got a whole bunch of other great enzymes, great products. So they got Gluten Guardian, which is awesome. If you ever eat gluten, it's a good thing to have on hand. I have it all the time. Masszymes is their digestive enzyme, their proteolytic digestive enzyme that I take all the time. And my suggestion with that is go to the website, watch the video. They literally just sprinkle some enzymes into a glass with some meat in it, and you just watch the meat dissolve. It's pretty darn cool. Show you how much active proteolytic enzymes are in there. And so one of the biggest issues in human health is undigested food. Undigested protein can cause havoc in the body, can drive up inflammation, can wreak havoc on the joints. So you guys also heard me say before, I take often my mast enzymes between meals or sometimes in the morning. So I'm looking to help break down those larger protein molecules to help eliminate joint pain. It's probably my favorite first line of defense also against joint pain. For someone who has elbow pain, knee pain, proteolytic enzymes in high dosages typically away from meals is very useful for helping your body break down these aberrant proteins. So yeah, something to think about, something to explore. You guys can head over to Bioptimizers.com and use the code muscle10, muscle10 for 10% off. And you can also get, like I say, on Mag Breakthrough, which is an incredible magnesium product, which you'll feel right away to improve your focus, your ability to sleep, your ability to calm down. Absolutely love it. It's important in the body's stress response as well. So I know a lot of our population doesn't sleep very well because we're high achievers. We're anxious sometimes, or we're busy. So for me, about 1,000 milligrams, that's a high dose, 1 to 2 times a day, every day, helps my body always maintain a really relaxed feel, allows my muscles to feel more supple so my blood flows better. Super, super important. So guys, if you are listening to the show and you want to optimize your body and your mind and your sleep, head over to bioptimizers.com/muscle10, bioptimizers.com, bioptimizers.com/muscle10. Without further ado from me, I hope you guys are amazing. I'm super grateful for you being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. It continues to be a pleasure, and I have lots of amazing stuff coming up for you soon. I've been working on a ton of stuff. You guys know I mentioned last time, I'm working on a personal training certification. I've just finished the first round of the mentorship, and it was amazing success. And I had such a great time. So anyone listening who's on the mentorship, guys, thank you. You guys are amazing. It was absolutely incredible to work with you. I'm also working on my physical transformation, and one more thing I'm not going to tell you about just yet, but I will if you come back next week. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. I'm Pekulski for the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you get to hear all of this transformation journey over the next few weeks and months. Have an amazing day. Live your greatest life in the body you love.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pekulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.